Welcome to the Love of the Star podcast, our weekly adventure where we talk about a franchise that doesn't win very often in the postseason. Bryan brought us. I'm Bobby Belt. That's Bryan brought us. And the Cowboys are one and done once again. They continue their legacy as a 12-6 football team. And you know what? We're going to run it back. We're going to run it back for year number 4, Bryan, as we get the news this week that Mike McCarthy's coming back. I'm sure there will be an extension for Dak Prescott. If Dan Quinn doesn't get a job, Dan Quinn will be back. It's going to be just the norm, the status quo. We're running it back. And I'm going to warn you guys in advance. I don't know about from Bryan's perspective, but I'm telling you right now from my perspective, this will be a little bit of a negative half hour or so that we're going to do here. 40 minutes, whatever it is. There's going to be some negativity here. And it's going to be the unvarnished, emotional assessment of where this football team is right now. Bryan, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Robert. You know what? My fallback, and it always has been all my life in football, and that's been, college, then into the NFL in 1992. When the season ends in the playoffs or whenever it ends, I just forget about football. I'm not worried about anybody that's now in the divisional round or the championship round or really, to be honest, the Super Bowl. I kind of look at, but the fortunate thing I've always been able to do is jump right into the draft. And I love the draft. I've said this a bunch. This would be a great gig if you didn't have to play games. If you just could evaluate players and build boards and draft and kind of, okay, we're all going to go away for the summer and then come back and do it all over again. But I'm going to dive straight into the draft. I already have. Probably 50 players deep. We've got the draft show going on, which you're a part of on DallasCowboys.com. Really excited, but these are the things you happen. You have to do the autopsy on what happened on the season. You mentioned about the Cowboys front office, the bringing back of Mike McCarthy. We'll see what the situation with Dak Prescott is. You mentioned a contract extension there, and then we'll see what happens with Dan Quinn. So, still some things to be decided, but we'll put a bow on this one and then get ready for some draft coverage.
Here's what's frustrating for me, Bryan, and I love draft season, and I love especially following a team that does a good job of replenishing their resources and building depth through the draft and finding really good, players on day 3 and day 1, 2, whatever else. Like I love what this team, I love following the way this team goes through their process of building a draft board and going through the, pro day circuit and then drafting players and then watching those guys show up in OTAs and minicamp. It's always a really exciting time. The problem is that I don't think a lack of players is this team's issue at this point. They've got good players. They've got a good roster. They always have a good roster. They have a completely incompetent head coach. And I think that even if they haven't quit on him in the classical sense of quitting in terms of, I don't like that guy, or I don't want to do this or that, even if they haven't quit in that classical sense, the bottom line is that they've been completely unprepared the last 3 playoff games that their season has ended on. They've walked out there looking like a scared football team, an unprepared football team, a undisciplined football team. And so that's nice that they like him and that they want him back. Sometimes structure and discipline is more necessary for you than who you like or who you feel good about. And the problem to me is that when you say run it back, I don't think there's really any amount of talent that's going to do the lack of discipline or the lack of attention to detail. And so the frustrating thing to me is that we didn't just say goodbye to 2023. It feels like we're saying goodbye to 2024, and we will reevaluate and see if this team has a chance to legitimately contend for a title in 2025. And that's kind of the negative headspace that I'm in right now.
Yeah, I don't think they really wanted to. The more you dive into this, Bobby, I don't think they wanted to do things differently in the front office, and I don't know if that's all Jerry Jones is doing. I think the day-to-day operation. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Bobby, because you deal with a lot of people over there as well. I think the day-to-day operation has been transferred to Stephen Jones, and then also to Will McClay, and you wonder, is it easier for them to bring back Mike McCarthy and not upset some of the things that they've done personnel-wise? Mike in Green Bay, and I worked with the Packers with Ted Thompson and Ron Wolf and those guys, for many years. And the Packers, the head coach was involved, but not to the point of a head coach being involved with personnel like he is here. Mike McCarthy, it's a new thing not new because he's gone through it 4 years now, but new in a way of him being involved. And he was a head coach for all those years in Green Bay. And so as a front office, you get comfortable with a guy, and he does win games. He does win regular season games. Unfortunately, in the playoffs, they haven't had the success. But you kind of wonder if Stephen Jones and Will McClay are interested in just completely having to change things now. Just completely having to, okay, if you do get a different coach in here, is this a coach that's a 3-4 or an odd front personnel guy? Do we have the players? Do we have to change out staffs? There's a certain amount of continuity that you really appreciate when you have a coach that you don't change. Look at the organizations like the Steelers, the Ravens. There's teams like that draft really, really well, and they do it because of the continuity. And they know the coaches, and they understand what they have to do. Do they replace some coaches every once in a while? Sure. See, that's the thing I would worry about if I was Steven and Will, is if you got a new defensive coordinator. Say Dan Quinn does get a job. Well, okay, now we have to turn around and are we bringing in a guy, a Wink Martindale? I mentioned his name because he's out there. He's a high-profile. Sure. High-profile defensive coordinator. Is it Mike Zimmer? Is it, who is that going to be? Is it going to be somebody that's going to want to change, everything that they've worked on all year in personnel and the evaluations they've made? Is it going to change? And sometimes change scares people, it scares them and they don't want to change because sure. And I think there's something to that. I think that Jerry Jones is he's involved, but is he involved like he used to be, say, 15 years ago? I don't, and I think this is some of it to Stephen.
I think he's honestly there as a veto at this point. Like
Jerry's the veto.
Yeah, I think Jerry's just. I think Jerry sort of is there as a.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna collect consensus.
Sure.
We're gonna come to it. Yeah. If I feel really convicted against the consensus, I will veto it. But otherwise, I'm just here to greenlight or veto. That's what I'm here for.
See, that's where, and I'm sorry my long explanation, but I just, I worked with that organization for 14 years, and I have a little bit of an understanding about it. But I think there's a little bit of that. Do we completely want to go into this, and just change everything? They've done this a couple of different times with Jason Garrett. Remember him going into the last year, coaching through, his contract. It's not something that they really want to be. They don't want to change. They want to be able to keep the continuity. And then, because they've had success. They've had success finding players. When you look at the roster, it's a roster that a lot of owners and general managers around the league would love to have. Unfortunately, the Cowboys did not draft particularly well as far as helping them this year. Now we'll see in coming years.
I don't want to throw dirt on anybody's name, not that you are. I'm just saying I don't want to. There's a lot of sense of like, well, look at that draft class. That sucks. It's like, I don't want to throw. There's a lot of complicating factors with this draft class that I would say give that a little bit.
No, and absolutely. And so the one thing these guys have proven is they can find players. They really can. So I think the finding players part of it is part of continuity, and I think that's what Stephen and Will and others would like to have right now. As much as we're wringing our hands and gnashing our teeth about Mike McCarthy, to them having to start over and change everything is not a very welcoming thing,
But is it changing?
It's not like Mike McCarthy is
everything?
4-13.
No, but he doesn't make a difference in the area. He was hired here to make a difference. He wasn't hired here to be better than Jason Garrett in the regular season. He was hired here to be better than Jason Garrett.
And I agree with you. And that's why I think that you've put him on notice that, hey, you've got to have some playoff success. Because if you look at his history, he actually has, and I think I'm right about this, he's had playoff success, But unfortunately, he hasn't in his tenure with the Dallas Cowboys. So, that's and the thing that troubles me is I don't know if Dak Prescott can play any better. I don't know that. Because I think he played pretty damn well this year, at an MVP type of a clip. And so now I'm thinking, wow, you had a quarterback playing at a MVP level and you couldn't get out of the first round of the playoffs? Now, that might be absolutely on your head coach. Might be on your defensive coordinator, Some of these players need to kind of step up and take a look at themselves.
Sure.
Micah Parsons.
Including the quarterback. Micah Parsons. I mean, there's others. CeeDee Lamb had a rough game, until, early in that game, it was rough. So I just think I think this is an organization that is really, and I hate to use the word comfortable, but they crave continuity. They crave that. And I think that's what we're dealing with right now. Hey, they've gotten it for 27 years now. They've gotten a staple of continuity. And I'm not saying this is to you, I know that you see it the same way. I think that I'm much more. Here's the thing: is that when you talk about Mike's been put on notice. This is the analogy I made on 105 through the fan. Jerry is at this point to me the parent who's never going to get to 3. He's going to go 1, 2, and then you're just going to hold it, and he's never going to get to 3 on you. And I miss the guy who got to 3. That's what I miss. And I think that it demanded it this time. When you have 53 players universally coming out and looking the way they did,
sure,
that falls on the guy preparing them. And not just the guy, not just the one guy, falls on all of the guys that were preparing. That is a coaching staff. The players have to own where their failures were. But when they come out universally looking terrified to play a team that you're better than Green Bay. And I know people say, it doesn't look like it. I'm telling you, in a vacuum, that is a better football team than Green Bay. But here's the difference is that I think if you play Green Bay 5 times in week 3 of the season, you win all 5. If you play Green Bay 5 times in the wild card, I don't know that you beat them, the majority of the time, because this team plays scared in the playoffs. They're unprepared when they get into the playoffs. They've got a coach who does not get them ready the right way. And it's been put on display several times. And if you want to ask questions about Dak Prescott, I disagree with a lot of the takes on Dak Prescott, but I can't push back objectively and tell you you're wrong right now, because he's developed a reputation, specifically under Mike McCarthy, that this is the way that he operates.
Yeah, it's 2-5. It's been a struggle. It really has. He played at a very high level against Tampa last year, and it's unfortunate that, since then, there's been some rough moments. Let me ask you this though, Bobby, since you're focused on some things there. Does the fact that Dan Quinn was up for 4 interviews last week, does it take away from the preparation of maybe what the defense, because what we've learned about the defense is communication could be a huge problem for this team. Or, and in the Green Bay game, several of those plays, I know folks have probably looked at the all-22 that have the access to it. I mean, you saw just flat busts, and communication problems and miscoverages. And, there were some physical things. The running game, we talked about how Green Bay was going to run the ball. We talked about it on our show. If you and I are talking about it, why are they not doing anything about it? That's the thing.
I mean, why are there runs for Aaron Jones where because a guy completely goes like takes a step in the wrong gap or whatever else? I mean, you have
around a block,
gaping
gets
10-yard holes.
Yeah.
Why is Luke Musgrave look like he's fair catching a punt on a pass down the field? There's nobody within 30 yards of him.
Communication.
That's the kind of stuff that is. I don't think just interviewing for jobs can explain away. Like it's just it's
But
it's
you
so
wonder, is your focus taken away for a moment? And
sure.
maybe this is totally unfair to Dan Quinn. Maybe this is totally unfair.
No, I don't
to
think
Dan
anything's
Quinn.
unfair to ask of anybody on this organization right now.
But see, you now the players see that like, wow, Dan's up for 4 jobs. Is he even going to be here?
Micah Parsons said maybe he takes me with him. That's what he said the week of a playoff game. He's talking about maybe Dan Quinn takes me to his new team. Yeah. I mean, they said it kind of joking, but the fact is, like, you're talking like that the week of a playoff game.
Yeah,
that seems
it's unfortunate. It really, really is. And but I understand why people. This is where I'm at right now, Bobby. This is where I'm at. Once the decision gets made, I just move on. I just say, fine. But here we are. We're talking about it because it's our podcast and people expect answers from us. You're right. I totally appreciate everything you said because I think you're right. I know people on Twitter have asked me, well, if you were the general manager, I said I would talk to Jim Harbaugh. I would talk to Jim Harbaugh if it was me. But you know what? I mean, I've also said in my history, hey, I talked to Urban Meyer.
Sure.
I mean that's kind of you kind of well.
But you know what? You're not comfortable with the results, which are short of an NFC title game. You're doing it in the pursuit of something different, and that's what this organization has shown. Or at the very top, they've shown no interest in doing is shaking things up. That they hope that eventually it clicks. They want it to be done their way rather than done by any means possible. It's not by any means possible for them. They want it done a very specific way, and it's a specific way that has failed for 27 years. And you would think at some point that would matter. One sec, Bryan. Let me just say real quickly, you are listening to the Love the Star podcast. The Love the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Bryan, go ahead. Tee off.
Yeah, my question to you, though, is this is going to sound wild, do you admire Philadelphia's way of handling their coaches as opposed to what's going on in Dallas? And I mean like a Doug Peterson after going to the Super Bowl basically moving on. Could we see Nick Sirianni get moved on?
I really do. I think it's.
And I hate to say anything great about Philadelphia. I do love Jeff Lurie because he gave me a great opportunity, and there's people there that are super, super people. But as an organization, I think you got to kind of appreciate the fact that they're willing to move on.
Walking away too early, leaving too early, I think is a mistake I'd rather make than holding on too long.
Sure.
I mean, and honestly, I feel like the approach of this team at times is that of a hoarder. Like they're pack rats and they hold on to things that's
a terrible show, man. The hoarder show is a terrible show.
You should have gotten rid of this a long time ago. When you say we're going to run it back or you do everything else, what you're telling me is results don't matter.
Well, let me tell you something that really bothers me, Bobby. Mike McCarthy told us after Kellen Moore was removed and he started to be the play caller, we started to hear things about running the football. We started to hear about we got to do a better job of running. We got to figure running game out. We got to do.
Oh, he sure as hell tried it against Green Bay. Put him in a hole. That was nice.
See, this is what's interesting. Really, all year they never found a running game. They really never did. But then when Mike McCarthy was pushed on it, he's like, well, we're scoring well. We're moving the ball. You guys want to focus on the running game? No, Mike, you're the one that told us after Kellen Moore was removed that you were going to have to do things differently in the running game, And so those are the kinds of things that if I was Jerry Jones, I would ask him that question. I'm like, Mike, in these meetings we had when you moved on from Kellen, we talked about running game. We talked about how to run the ball. We had talked about, what we had to do here, and we didn't deliver on that, Mike, 3 years in a row now, one of the most penalized teams in the National Football League. What are we doing about that? There are questions you can ask about Mike McCarthy. Mike, we can't advance in the playoffs. There's questions, he said he had a 3-hour meeting with Jerry. I hope that Jerry and Steven asked those questions. I hope they did. And I hope they're like, listen, you talked about running the ball. We couldn't run the ball. And teams sat there and, cover 2, cover 4, and just dared you to run, and you couldn't run. So I don't know. I mean, those are the kinds of things that I really hold against Mike, that you understood you had to help Dak, you had to try and find a way to run the ball. You couldn't. But Dak overcame that. Give Dak credit. Give CeeDee Lamb credit for the way he played. Cooks, give them credit. But, when you really, really, really had to do it, you couldn't do it. See, that's where I fault Mike McCarthy.
Yeah, and I mean, look, if they are going to, there's a lot of ways that this can be at times from the top down through the players, can be a pretty defensive organization at times. Well, not me, I confess. No, not in that sense. Just if you challenge, what's up with your toughness? Why don't you step up in big games? Why don't they take offense to it? And I mean that from, you start, if you were to push Jerry on some of this stuff, he'd get a little, and it's natural, but he'd probably bow up a little bit and say, you don't have that right. Mike McCarthy, you say stuff to him about his team's, toughness. No. Even right after the game, they're talking about them coming out flat. He's like, I don't think we came out flat. They just made more plays than us.
Well, he was talking about we played too fast. Was another
Dak will bow up and say something about, this damn sure isn't the standard. To me, it's like, if you are running this back, here's what I want to set a precedent for over the next 12 months. You are not allowed to get upset or push back against any question thrown at you. Every single question of you from top to bottom is valid. Every single one of them. Because you guys have bowed up so many times and been proven wrong. Nobody is taking you seriously when you tell us we're wrong about a criticism. Every criticism is fair until you show us it isn't. You have to show us. I'm tired of the rhetoric pushing back against it. Mike, leading up to the Green Bay game, I'm asking him a question about toughness and physicality in the trenches, and he just took super offense to the idea of questioning physicality and toughness, and he blew off the question, wouldn't answer. Sure. Let's go back to Friday. Answer that question, because damn sure proved that way on the field on Sunday.
Yeah. No.
You don't get to be offended by questions anymore from the top down to the bottom. You have to take all of them, and you have to internalize all of it and correct it. And if you don't, then all of this rhetoric and all this talk about running it back and continuity is bullshit. And that's just the fact.
Yeah. I mean, I understand your frustration is valid, very valid, because like I said, once Jerry said that Mike's coming back, I'm like, okay, figure it out. But do you really trust them to figure it out? Do you trust Mike McCarthy to figure it out? Like I say, the problems I have with Mike is that, like I said, his word. He talked about running the football. They didn't run the football. They didn't get any better at it. They talk about penalties all the time. Didn't get better at that. Lead the league in penalties again.
Details.
Yeah. That's
good.
The thing.
Good playoff teams, Super Bowl teams are always. If you want to talk about a defining trait universally, sometimes there are defensive first football teams, offensive first football teams, teams that have great quarterbacks, teams that have marginal quarterbacks. One of the defining traits of every single Super Bowl team, if you go from Super Bowl 1 up through 57, is they all are good at details.
They are.
There's not a poorly disciplined, bad attention to detail team that has won a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And yet it's a defining trait of this team.
Maybe the Raiders back in the day, the old 70s Raiders.
But that was part of their character.
Yeah.
Like that was part of the way that they...
I'm just saying, if somebody were to argue with you, they would say... But
that wasn't a lack of discipline, though, was it? That was controlled intimidation.
Man, those guys were awesome. Those Raider teams back in the days. But I think with McCarthy, I'm not willing to give the benefit of the doubt anymore. That's where I'm at. I'm not going to, if I see things that are not right, just point them out. I do that anyway. I think we both do that.
Sure.
But, you can't, and I just don't think the regular season matters now. I mean, it really is all about the playoffs for this guy and this team, because if they don't have success in the regular season, he's going to get fired. If they don't have success in the playoffs, he's going to get fired. But that's kind of where we're at.
I'd like to think so, but I don't know.
What's that?
'Cause I said I'd like to think that's the case, but I genuinely don't know. Because
I do.
To be honest, the standard has been set several times.
No,
and what I don't want to hear is I don't want to hear what is it? It's January 18th. What I'm already not excited for is 12 months from now when you get held down and get the snot beat out of you by San Francisco or Green Bay or Los Angeles or whoever it's going to be in 12 months because you ran this back and you didn't address the issue, the cancer that existed as your team, which is the accountability and the preparation of the football team. What I don't want to hear next year is, well, it was right there for us. And, oh, this damn sure is a disappointment for our standard. And I don't want to hear, man, this was the most vulnerable it ever looked. And I can't tell you how disappointed and the check I would write or whatever else. I don't want to hear it anymore. And I think everybody's fed up with it.
Yeah.
I think everybody's tired of it. And it's all words. And the words mean nothing after 27 years. It means absolutely
You're not wrong.
Nothing.
You're not wrong. And I could say, I was a young guy the last time they won a Super Bowl. I was a young guy, but now, it's tough. And I feel bad I do feel bad for Cowboy fans because of the commitment they make every year. They make a big commitment. And I think that's why Jerry apologized to them right off the jump after that game. He understands, and the people think that, well, Jerry doesn't care. All he cares about is money and stuff like that. I
don't think that's true. I don't think
that's true. I think it hurts Jerry to lose, but I think Jerry's to a point now where he's I'm going to hate to say this, but he's riding this thing out. He's riding it out with Steven and Will and others kind of, he's like you said, he's vetoing, he's approving, hey, Jerry, we're doing this. Hey, Jerry, we're doing that. Oh, okay, fine, good, yeah, great. Jerry is, I think it bothers him. I really, really do. But I think he's put so much faith in Steven and Will and to a point to Mike McCarthy and Dan Quinn. He's paying Dan Quinn like he's a head coach. He didn't want to lose Dan Quinn. He is paying Dan Quinn like he's an NFL head coach. And so, he's trying to make that commitment, but it's like, I don't think he has his hand on I think the word is till when they're, like when you're sailing a sailboat. I don't think he's
I don't know sailboat,
the rudder.
Sure.
I think it's called the till. But I mean, I'm using words. I just don't even, I think it is called the till. But he doesn't have his hands on that wheel. It's kind of like, okay, Steven, Jerry Jr., Charlotte, you guys handle this. Will handle this. Alex Loomis handle this. He's got a lot of handling going on. And I think there's which
isn't a bad way. Delegation is not a bad way. And, but if you have that veto power and you have that rubber stamp, you need to use it sometimes.
Well, but then you've got people convincing him that, well, it's really good. We need to keep Mike for continuity. We need to keep Mike and the staff together for continuity. Because if we change, we're maybe going to have to change our front. Maybe we're going to have to change our personnel. Maybe we're going to have to change the way we evaluate. Maybe we're going to have to change people in the staff. I mean, it just, for right now to them, I don't think they want to change. Well, obviously they don't want to change because they didn't change.
Yeah.
But I think it's this, I think if it doesn't turn out better, and I mean better as far as playoff success, then I think you will see, I think that this conversation 365 days from now will be about another coach. Yeah.
Hopefully,
if it doesn't work out.
Hopefully they actually get to 3 and not just 2.5. You are listening to the Love the Star podcast, the Love the Stars and Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Bryan, here just in the last few minutes, I didn't put out a call for questions today. Sure. We'll do questions again next week because I know how a lot of these questions are going to be. It's just going to be the same general anger, like asked in a different way.
Blame folks, Bobby.
Sure, no, I don't either. It's just I didn't know. I wasn't going to be able to come up with 5 different ways to ask the same question. So here's what I'm going to ask you about.
Real quick.
Yeah.
When you get to my age and you get numb, you just get numb. Like I'm seeing people that just it's really hurting them right now. What's going on with this team?
Yeah.
But you get numb about all this because you just kind of know. You just know, and you do the work, and you watch the tape, and you evaluate, and you're like, man, they weren't good here. They weren't good here. They didn't do enough here. Green Bay took advantage of this. It just kind of makes me numb now. I just try not, I try not to get emotionally involved in it, and it's hard. And I can understand fans out there that listen to our podcast, and God knows we appreciate every single one of you. And I get it, because one time I was in your place, one time I was there, but I just have become numb by it. I look at it now as a job. I don't look at it as one way or another, a passion or anything like that. I just look at it as it's my job to report on this team and talk about the good and the bad and do the best I can.
Yeah, and I think that's. I think everybody understands. I think everybody understands it. I hope. I don't know. Haven't heard. I genuinely hope the Cowboys understand that the people at the top understand that. Totally get if you feel like this is awful. We disagree, and we think it's going to be proven in time. I would hope Mike McCarthy understands. There's a lot of people who think you don't deserve to be here right now, and I would hope he would understand that and say, I got a lot to prove you wrong. I would hope. And as much as I believe him, I would hope Dak understands. Yep, I've let you guys down, and I totally understand.
Micah Parsons, I've let you down. I mean, Michael. There's players that can say absolutely they let you down in this one.
Yeah, 53
absolutely.
of them can probably tell you that.
Who's that?
I said 53 of them can probably tell you that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing, is that I would hope that the people in the organization who made the determination to bring it back and what like from top to bottom, I would hope Dak, Mike McCarthy, Jerry, Steven, Dan Quinn, whoever, I would hope they all recognize anything you want to say about us right now is fair. And anything
I think you make an excellent point.
Any criticism you want to level against us, we'll take it right now, and we'll take it understanding you're upset and we're upset too. And we've got to earn back your trust and show you why we think you're wrong. But we can't tell you with certainty right now that you're wrong, because you've earned the right to tell us we don't know what we're doing. And Jerry gave us a little bit of that, I think, after the game, where he said, obviously the way I approached it hasn't been correct yet because we haven't won. Nothing's changed. That's what he said. And so, I mean, I think Jerry's got a little bit of that. Here's what I'll say. Closing on a little bit of optimism here in the last few minutes.
The draft?
Well, I mean, there's that. Here, I will say this. I believe 100% in Jerry Jones's desire to win. Mm-hmm. And I believe in his I believe in his growth to try and delegate where he felt like, hey, this is a more effective way for us to build an organization. Yeah. I agree with that. I think that Steven knows how to manage a front office. I think that that's something that he does well. I think that Will McClay is probably if not the best, like one of the top 3 guys overseeing talent evaluation in the scouting department in the NFL. I think he oversees a lot of really talented personnel people. I think the personnel department from top to bottom is really, really good.
Yeah.
Every single one of them. And I think that they approach things in a unique way from the rest of the league that really gives the Cowboys a serious, significant advantage. I think as much as I understand there's frustration with Dan Quinn and everything else, I do think that over 3 years, he's shown you things that he's able to do here that we were begging other defensive coaches to do for a long time, about putting people in the best position to succeed, generating turnovers. So I still think that I understand that right now it's frustrating, and there have been a lot of big games where Dan Quinn's defense hasn't come through. But overall, I think that it's not a bad thing necessarily if he comes back. I think that Mike McCarthy being in the NFL for 30 years and coaching in a lot of different areas and coaching a lot of different things, I think that there's not a whole hell of a lot he hasn't seen. And so he's got experience with how to deal with and how to compartmentalize and how to show guys how to handle it and react to it. And I think there's value in that. I think he does a good job of shielding his players from criticism and making sure that they don't internalize that. I think that he does a good job taking the bullets at times and saying, hey, nope, that's me. I'll take that one. I think that that's all positive. I obviously believe in a big way in Dak Prescott. And so these are all things that I think are really positives. And my greatest area of comfort right now is Will McClay and, the entire staff that he oversees.
Sure.
That group is my greatest hope.
That's the group that gives me hope.
here's the only problem with it, and to just bring it back around a little bit, like I said at the very beginning, I think the problem is it hasn't been that your players haven't been good enough.
Sure.
You've got really good players. You've had really good players. Sure, do your linebackers need to be better? Was your linebacker core awful this year? Yep, it was really bad. Were you weak up the middle at times? Yep.
Yes.
Did you have soft edges? Yeah.
Yep.
Could you run the ball on offense? Nope. Like, I mean, there's lots of things there that could be better, but I mean, that's every team has weaknesses. You're not going to have a bulletproof team, and so you can go get players, but it is a war of attrition, and you will lose guys and you'll gain guys, and eventually next year there will be something else that's maybe not great. Maybe next year we'll look at it and say, your offensive line's really not that good, or we'll look at it and say, man, this secondary is not one of the better ones in the NFL. And I'm not saying that will be the case, but there will be something, because that's the nature of the NFL and the nature of a capped league, and the way that you have to cycle players out. And I always trust that they will build and replenish as best they can. But again, I think that the problem isn't, can you find 53 talented players? I think the problem was, can you find somebody or several somebodies to make sure that those 53 players are prepared in the biggest moments? Because the answer for 3 years has been absolutely not. You have not.
You're right. You're right about that. You're absolutely right about that.
Any final thoughts on the 2023 season from you here, Bryan, before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. I think we have to hold them accountable. I don't think they're above any criticism that the fan base or media or anything gives them. I think you have to be fair about it, though, and report it in that way. They need an outstanding offseason. We'll see if, in fact, that Stephen Jones's response to all that is going on right now is that they get really aggressive when free agency rolls around. I mean aggressive. If they determine, hey, go get this best linebacker, or go get this best guy, or go get, they need to have a really good offseason, they can't afford to have a draft where, and they've had a lot of great ones, but they need that magical Will McClay draft that, they need that 2005 Bill Parcells draft. And I'm not saying that because I was part of it, but, with the Ware and the Spears and they need
the 05 draft, or they need the 2016 draft. They need to go get Zeke, Malik Collins, Anthony Brown, and Dak Prescott.
They need that. You're absolutely right. And so, that's my faith. That's my hope, because this time of year, that's really all you got right now. You got to rebuild this thing. And, if it's proven, though, that Mike McCarthy and them can't handle the job, or they can't get it through the playoffs like it needs to be, then they will be replaced. And that's what I know. There's some things now that we know that if it's not good enough, he will be replaced. I do believe that with all my heart. But if they have success and they get through the playoffs, by all means, find a way to keep things going. But right now, I'm just going to sit there and evaluate the team, and I'm going to evaluate who they get, and I'm going to try and fit it all together. And they've got to kind of, I think they've got a lot to do to try and get some of their fan base back, because there's a lot of their fan base that's they're not interested in this. And I say that not interested, but they're interested, not to the point that they once were. And I think that's unfortunate right now, that they're like, why should we invest in this? But, you find a way to kind of have some success and then get the thing in the playoffs and get it going successfully again. Then I think you'll see people change their attitude about this football team.
That does it for us here today on the Love the Star podcast and for the 2023 season. It doesn't do it for us in 2024 off season. We'll march ahead with that, giving you a couple episodes a week still. And looking ahead to the draft, we will obviously we'll be in Las Vegas here in a couple weeks for the Super Bowl. And we'll do some stuff from there. I will be in Indianapolis around Combine time. We'll be sitting on that bus again with Jerry Jones, hearing what he has to say, outlook, hopefully hearing some whispers about free agency. Then the draft will roll around. And before you know it, we will be back in Oxnard for training camp and taking a look at the 2024 season. Appreciate you guys for riding with us this season and riding into the offseason with us. For Bryan Broaddus, I'm Bobby Belt. We will talk to you guys again later. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest updates. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.